Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Savi Kyatham, facilitator for the session. I am with CIO Advisory Group at KPMG. We focus on providing end-to-end digital transformation and modern technology solutions, focusing on faster value stream delivery through our proven delivery models. And again, thank you for joining the session because we have an amazing panel on rapid tech transformation. Digital transformation roadmaps that generally range from 18 months to multiple years. The events of this year condense the timeline down to weeks or days for many companies as they quickly had to move in on-premise processes to a remote world. How could that all be accomplished so quickly? Our panelists will share experiences and valuable client stories on this topic and answer any of the questions you may have throughout the session. Few logistics before we begin. We will spend a few minutes learning about each panelist as they briefly introduce themselves and tell a little bit about their background. Then we will begin the conversations by asking questions. So let's get started with the panel introductions. Joining us today, we have three distinguished panelists, Mary Buenano, CTO at Steward Health, Matt Hillary, CTO at Access Group, and David Smith, Vice President, US Partner at Microsoft. So I request Mary to introduce herself first, followed by Matt and David.
Great, thank you. So I am Mary Bonanno. I am the Chief Technology Officer at Steward Healthcare. Steward Healthcare is a physician-owned organization that has 35 hospitals across the United States, and just recently went from 3 to 6 internationally. We have 3 in Malta, and we just got 3 in Colombia. And I have been in healthcare just about 25 years, having worked in hospitality before that.
Matt?
Hi, everyone. Matt Hillary from Access. Access is the largest private information management hard copy and digital storage company in this space. You probably have heard of Iron Mountain. They're the largest public player in the space. I have a background in software. I'm a system builder by trade, I guess you'd say, but I've been in this information management game for over a decade now, and have been at Access working on our own digital transformation here for the better part of the year. Happy to be here.
Hey, Savi. David Smith with Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft 23 years, had a lot of different roles. My current role is supporting great partners like KPMG, and all of the partners that are out there trying to enable this digital transformation at a rapid pace that you talked about in the intro. Oh, by the way, I'm also, just quickly, Savi, I'm also the leader for the One Commercial Partner Group for Diversity and Inclusion, which is a really important topic for all of us too. So any questions that want to pop up at some point during the conversation on that, I'd be happy to answer.
Oh, thank you very much, adding that's a key point. Thank you. So before we get started, I think let's warm up with quick thoughts. Like, more and more customers are expecting a seamless digital experience in their interactions. COVID has disrupted not just how we shop, but also how we work to attract all ages, including millennials. So digitalization is the value proposition of all products. Maybe, David, I will start with you. Can you give us 30,000-foot overview of what you're seeing from digital transformation perspective at Microsoft? Is it just Teams and Office 365, or are you seeing entire enterprises speeding up their transformations?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the great kickoff question, Savi. Look, I think things like Teams has impacted hundreds of thousands of folks in terms of lighting them up in terms of being able to have voice and video and collaboration in a secure way and from anywhere. But it goes well beyond that. And the way we think about it at Microsoft is really around 6 different sort of forms of digital transformation. One is obviously around business continuity and agility. And I think everybody on this call is probably thinking about that for your organizations. How do you have faster response time around operational impacts and reliability? These things, you just have to be super, super tight with continuity and agility. The second is around enabling work and productivity. Obviously, this is the team's play. It's around empowering your employees and your customers and your supply chain. It's much more than just voice and video. It's the ability to collaborate, as I mentioned earlier, in a secure way, and to be in some ways more productive and more agile than ever before. The third is around what I would call really the nitty-gritty when it comes to board and the CXO level decisions, which is around cost optimization and operational efficiency. There is no room for redundancies and waste these days. Cost-conscious organizations just aren't going to spend on IT or change just because of COVID. They're really going to understand how they're going to come out of this stronger on the other side, especially as we go into the new fiscal year. Fourth, quickly, adapting to change in the customer needs. Look, we all need to be more customer-centric than ever before. This digital environment that we're all getting into is not just internally to the organizations. It extends to how we work down through our customers and our suppliers, as I mentioned. This capacity and scalability piece is the fifth, obviously around being able to scale up and scale down cloud workloads. And then more importantly, skilling many of your ops and IT folks within the organizations. And then finally, cybersecurity and risk and shadow IT. Again, these are things that are huge topics. These 6 represent one cloud in terms of Microsoft across this M365's Teams, security, Azure, Dynamics, and yes, probably even Surface in many cases for most.
Wow. Thank you. As you're talking about it, couple C's I actually caught. One is customer, continuity, cost optimization, change, and last but not the least is cloud. So I'll just look to Mary to ask, how are you harnessing digital transformation energy from leadership? When there is an active push to adopt and adapt, is this the right time to be okay with bare minimums, or how are we trying to actively work on the tech debt?
So it's a good question, and I don't think, at least from a steward perspective, there's one answer, because it's kind of a little bit of both, right? There are places where, based on either speed or need, that bare minimum is going to be good enough to get us through what we need. If you're looking at trying to react quickly to some of the challenges that COVID has definitely put on hospitals and health systems and healthcare workers, right? So there may be times where, based on everything that they're seeing, bare minimum is enough. You just need to get them where they need to go and not worry about the technical debt and what we're trying to get rid of. But then there are other places where it really does make more sense to try to go further, right? And to try to get rid of that technical debt and really jettison the company forward where it needs to go. And I wish there was one answer, but it really is like the tool in the toolbox. You've got to pick out the right one at the right time.
Yeah, okay. And tagging on to that question, Mary, do you think COVID has any direct or indirect impacts on active tech transformations in your company or in general?
Yeah, I mean, from a steward perspective, we have seen it where it is actually jettisoned some of the projects that we were looking to do that, we were dragging our feet on. Healthcare tends to sometimes be 10 years behind everybody else. So things that other companies were doing, and to David's point, Teams is a big one. We had still been using Skype and everyone talking about Teams, and they were, reluctant to try to move forward and to get going, and who would need IM and presence. And when we quickly sent 2,000 people home and no one could work in offices, it was amazing how fast they realized that that teams would help them continue to be productive. And then on top of it all, we also looked at some of the other, some other stuff from a video for patients and physicians. But that would have taken us at least another 9 months to get going, and we pretty much had it up and running in 10 days.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mary, you touched a good point about being behind the race and losing that race in terms of tech when it comes to hospitals. Maybe it's a question to David to ask, has Microsoft been able to implement anything to help some of the smaller healthcare systems or practices so that they are competing in the race? And then, as Mary was saying, no over-ambitious expectations, but to have just bare minimum so that they can survive and run the business.
Yeah, I'm going to build off Mary. I love your story. It's like a story that starts out 10 years behind and to getting things done in 10 days. That's like the definition of transforming with urgency and impact. It's amazing. I think, look, I think there's a couple things here. It's not just remote workers. In Mary's case, all of a sudden being at home and then needing the ability to collaborate and be productive and that sort of thing, sort of the traditional work, but just at home. It's doing it in ways that allow them to fit in and be productive in a secure way. And then it extends to how can they be a part of a new system of transformation with the organization. We have 3 specific examples, all have a theme around security, where KPMG and Microsoft have worked together, at least the first story. One I think I'm allowed to share is around Baptist Health. It was ambulatory capacity tracking, where we leveraged our Power Apps, really a platform capability to securely load balance and schedule appointments. Again, that's one of those stories that started off like it would have taken a long time to literally this is happening in days, if not weeks. There's another example where we work with a healthcare provider to do a 2-week security assessment in conjunction with a project to identify current case counts, contact tracing, and predictive modeling trends to know what the workloads are going to be in terms of patient care and PPE. And then this hospital was able to share that locally with state and local government agents, as well as other hospitals, so that they could load balance staffing. I mean, it's really amazing. Something that, again, where healthcare organizations would have thought, no way can we do this quickly. They were able to leverage current tool sets to get out there and really do what they do best, and then ultimately serve those patients in new ways, and do it again with these remote workers that are literally just getting lit up with this remote capability to serve the organization. One final quick one that I think will connect with folks is there was another healthcare provider we recently worked with that built, again, to Mary's sort of story around from 10 years behind to doing things in 10 days, a secure notification platform. So patients can subscribe to it. So imagine patients going to healthcare organizations either for testing or for care. They are either after that care or tracking, I guess in the future, their dosage in terms of getting vaccinated. They subscribe to this and it becomes a notification system built on Teams. And this allows a very collaborative way to follow up with the patients wherever they are. And so Teams is not just this voice and video, but it becomes a platform for alerts and immediate conference calls, regardless of where those patients are. I think it's another amazing example of healthcare organizations really leveraging tool sets that exist today, being really data and security sensitive, but being able to prop things up that drive immediate results and impact really in a tough time with COVID with their patients.
Wow. Thank you. That's exciting to see, like, emerging technologies. So now I think it's time to look to Matt and ask a little bit about, being there is a big change in the way we are doing, and especially in your area, the core business. Can you talk about a little bit on top emerging technologies that you foresee playing a role in your domain, or current technologies that you are using currently in your company?
Yeah, sure. So, my firm is in an interesting spot. We're really at the intersection of a lot of transformation. Our core business is storing and retrieving paper. And you'd be surprised. I'd like to say that, about 90% of the enterprise is digitized, and there's still, a solid 10%. That's probably low, in fact. But what's interesting is, when you have a crisis like COVID and it sends everybody home, the access to that paper becomes very difficult. So a lot of the technology that's been developing, and maturing over a very long period of time is really ready to handle some of this transformation, I think, and so the pandemic has been an accelerator for sure, as we all talk about, but specifically, artificial intelligence and machine learning are playing a really significant role in this transformation, and I think that's something that's, been very difficult to harness in the past. These core algorithms have been around forever, but today the technology is so accessible and so much less expensive. When a crisis like this is upon us, we're able to implement so much more efficiently and quickly. So we're seeing that in healthcare and in other businesses that still have 10% of their data in paper.
And when you say 90% digitized, maybe this question is for all of you.
Digital.
But yeah, and then Matt, maybe you can start with it. What are the top challenges that companies, and you can focus on your domain, it's okay, that companies are seeing while embracing rapid tech transformation? Can you recollect some challenges? Because when you say 90% digitized, that's a great success number.
Well, it's a right. So that remaining 10% is really difficult, right? We have, law firms in the city that are used to managing active files in the office, and when everybody's sent home, what do? They have to, they have to do curbside pickup. So the lawyers have to drive into the city from home and pick up the files. We've got, oncology X-rays that, are not digitized, that have to be delivered to the point of care. So there's all these little examples that still are with us, and I think it's really caused business to question, how can we move more quickly? And and the technology's there, so it's really an interesting time.
Yeah. So if you summarize challenges, one I heard is, still there needs to be some paper-based or hard copies that needs to be picked up for shredding. Any other challenges that you could think of as your company was going into rapid transformation? There's certainly, it's not without its challenges. Anytime you're dealing with physical media, I think people lose track of the fact of how expensive digitization can be, and you can't just snap your fingers or wave your magic wand and transform an organization, right? It's expensive and time consuming. So how do you eat an elephant, right? You've got to have a series of plays and plans in place, and you have to step through it over time. So some organizations are further, are more mature than others, I think is how I would, describe it. And those plans are better laid in some places than others. Totally. Mary, would you like to add anything?
Yeah. I mean, I think, Matt, I think you're spot on when it comes to it. It from not only an expense perspective, but it's a workflow perspective, right? So healthcare for so long has really been within the four walls. And anyone knows that in these days that really doesn't exist. But a lot of the business processes relied on everyone being in there, being on the network, being together, moving paper from one to another, and shuffling it from AP over here. And when people went home and they're still trying to get the mail out of the office, they're still trying to get stuff scanned and then sent over to folks but who have to print it to sign it, to then it really came down to what the workflows were and how some IT, we went home without a problem. AP and the billing office took a little more work. Not only did their desktops not handle it, their workflows didn't handle it. They were a lot of paper-based and a lot of in four walls, and how do you do that? And, issuing checks, right? Great, makes sense, but you got to be in the office to be able to do that. So I think that was a lot of the things that we saw, is that the workflows just weren't ready and didn't support it, take the technology away from it.
Yeah, totally. David, you heard from two different domains, and then they are on the same page in terms of what the challenges are. Anything you can add on top of it?
Yeah, I mean, you take that example around the workflows and how do you digitize it? How do you modernize it? How do you do it in a secure way? We've been spending a lot of time getting feedback from CIOs over the past couple months and business leaders, companies of all sizes. And the number one challenge that we're getting direct feedback on is skilling, technical training and skilling, not only of their existing operations teams and technical teams, but there's a modern way, to think about low code and no code scenarios, ways that we can digitize these workflows that Mary just walked through, not as a 2-year or 3-year project, but in a shorter time frame. And there's a lot of new, what I would call cloud development and deployment methodologies, where we need to spend time, more time, building up the next generation, as well as retraining and reskilling many of our existing amazing employees.
Wow. That's a great one to talk about, upskilling and then making sure they're very productive while using the technology. Thank you. Mary, I think it may be a tough question, but I'll try. I don't want to generalize, but can you think of any situation where in your company you had to implement an enterprise-wide software, and then how long it took for you to roll out whole thing from, say, concept to fruition, from vendor selection to active use of the software? Was it the fastest thing that you could do? Can you share the timelines as appropriate?
Sure. So, typically, Stuart, how they work is, we might take a while to decide to do something, but once we decide to do it, we go through it pretty quickly from, acquisition to, build and implementation and out the door. But, still, it can take months or years depending on what the project was. COVID definitely. There were 2 projects that we went very quickly from soup to nuts. One was Teams, and there were 2 major scenarios that we were trying to handle. So, especially being in Massachusetts, and we get hit hard and pretty fast and early, was how do we never had a telemedicine program, and how do we quickly spin one up so that our physician practices could still continue to see their patients, COVID or no COVID, depending on what it was, but how do we still enable them to do that? And like I said, we really weren't using any type of technology for that. And I'd say IT was about the only one that was using video. We basically went to working with our physician practices. We went from start to how do we roll this out? How do we get it out to people? What does it look like? How do you train them? How do they handle it with patients from 0 to 10 days? And in 10 days, we had rolled out the entire program to over 6,000 physicians. And they quickly were seeing 10,000 visits a week. And, it spiked quick, it spiked hard. And I'll be honest with you, from the training to everything else, we saw very, very little challenges when it came to it. And it's probably one of the fastest ones we had ever done. We needed some cameras to do to be able to watch some of the patients. And we went from calling a company to see what their solution was to demoing it to implementation in 7 days. We were already installing cameras in patient rooms. So, and I'll tell you, pre-COVID, none of that would have taken, people would have had to get in a room and talk about it forever, and they could never change anything. And I would say that from 7 days to start to finish to start to install, and then the Teams one, people were fighting that, and in 10 days have over 10,000 visits. I have to admit, we were pretty impressed with ourselves on that one.
Yep, such an impressive stories and very encouraging. Thank you for sharing that, Mary. Matt, do you have any stories where you had fastest transformation that happened in the last 9 months or so?
Absolutely. I'll give you a couple examples of kind of wrapped in one event. I tend to leave the enterprise software deployments to the CIO's office, and I'm responsible for innovation and product for our firm. So in that context, I remember as the pandemic was really taking hold, and our CFO's office was making some fairly aggressive decisions around cost control and so forth, which turned out to be very insightful. I remember taking a call from my CEO, and he said, "Look, this is going to be hard, but I want to focus on a segment of our resources on coming out of this stronger than we are now." I think at the time we were calling it a rebound team, and we set up a series of very, very agile teams to ideate around new product development that could happen very rapidly and get into the market as quickly as possible. And earlier, David was talking about upskilling and so forth, and I'll tell you, for a storage and logistics company, there was a lot of new muscle that had to be built very, very quickly to do some of these rapid product development cycles, and it was uncomfortable, but we compressed cycles that would normally take years into weeks, and we moved product into market, some new digital offerings very, very quickly, and started iterating with our customers. And there was really an opportunity to do that in a way that we hadn't done it before, because there was some understanding and some expectation around things being a little bit more agile, a little bit more rough around the edges, not sanded as well. So we moved a number of digital products very, very quickly to market, just because of that atmosphere.
Yeah, thank you. I think COVID has taught us how to increase the business agility. Such a promising story. Thank you. And David, I think, Mary talked about how the team's rollout happened so fast, and then Matt was talking about how agile teams helped on new product development. Will you see transformation of IT rollouts changing to be more agile and more nimble, or is there any possibility that we'll fall back into old ways once this is all over?
Well, just look at the smiles and in sort of the energy behind Matt and Mary's just last two stories. I don't think we're putting this back in the bag. We've learned how to ride this bike, and it's been certainly extremely stressful, not only on us, everybody on this call, but our families and our teams. But this determination to come out stronger, the determination about what's possible, I think is just really inspiring. And I don't think that inspiration, those learnings are going to easily be forgotten. In fact, I think we're going to build off them. Now, I would say, look, it's unpredictable what's going to happen with COVID and this pandemic, what's happening in the economy, that's the forced disruption that's happening at companies of all sizes, families of all sizes, communities of all sizes. It's unpredictable. But what I would say is that it's crystal clear, absolutely crystal clear, that you have to be in the cloud for agility and access for your people to be able to contribute from anywhere at any time. That's the one crystal clear learning I think we all have. And so then it's going to come to, I think, the duration of this next recovery phase, not just from an economic standpoint, I think, but from a societal standpoint, and really from you could say herd mentality, but almost from a medical and health standpoint. I'm not an expert on crystal balls, but I do know Bill Gates. I've met him a couple times in my time here at Microsoft, even when he was CEO when I first started. He's got a couple of great podcasts. One of his recent ones actually talked about what he sees in the year ahead. He talks about remote meetings being normalized. I'm just going to hit a couple headlines. I would just encourage you to go out and check Bill G's podcast and listen to a couple of them. But the first one is about that he talks about is remote meetings being normalized. That's based on a recent CIO survey that I also just referenced earlier, where 50% of the people on any given day, even a year or 2 years from now, are not going to be working from the office, regardless of the industry or vertical or scenario that you're currently in. That's a pretty dramatic change. The second is travel's going to be questioned. Maybe in the past, many of you would have traveled to a KPMG site for this session. Some may be dialed in remote, but we used to do a lot more events like this in person. Now, the question in the future is, do we need to take that cost? Or are there more digital and efficient and effective ways to have the same or even better experiences? The third he talks about is around software innovation. He says, it's amazing to hear this from Bill after 30 years of Microsoft. His software innovation is just going to be continuous. If you take a look at Teams and the innovation that's happening on Teams, it's literally daily innovation, which is really, really exciting. And it's daily innovation with devices. In our case, we have amazing third-party providers and first-party with Surface. Even our new Duo is an amazing experience with that flip open device. The fourth he talks about is office sharing and cross-company office sharing. So maybe KPMG and Microsoft in the future, or maybe Matt's organization or Mary's organization or Microsoft could physically be sharing the same office space. And that's going to be a big trend. And then finally, he talks about a couple interesting ones. Downtown's less important, that we're going to socialize less at work and more in our communities. And then he kind of closes by saying things are just not going to go back to this normal state, what we used to think was normal, for a long time. And I think it's a pretty optimistic view overall, but it's one that is fundamentally different at its core.
Yeah, great point. We all talk about being new normal. I don't know if I ever call it as new normal, but it's always been normal how we all got adjusted to COVID. Maybe this question is for Matt. So, David touched upon a couple things about costs, expenses, or budget, right? Everything boils down to money. No idea is free, no software implementation is free, no transformation is free. So have you been able to get funding for everything you needed to keep the doors open for innovation and for existing initiatives? Matt?
So sorry. It's a great
Smiling.
question. Smiling and talking. I had a great answer too. Nothing is easy when you're fundraising. But I think what a real proof point in how serious this transformation is and how resilient the new normal will be is where business leaders end up in investment decisions. So we have seen my board really lean in and show interest in accelerating the innovation in this company to take advantage of the changes that are moving more quickly than I think we anticipated. And it's not a wait and see mindset. It's a let's lean in and come out the other side stronger than we are today. So we have been successful there, and I think that's if you follow the money and really think about these commitments, like these financial commitments that are being made across the globe, it's going to make that new normal, a lot more durable. We're not going to go back. It's just the new normal.
Yeah. I like the way you said lean in and accelerate. I think, Mary, I will turn over to you to ask, how will your conversations be like with your management when asking for funding?
Well, they've morphed over time. And if you take pre-COVID, IT would go up against looking for the same funding, right? So you needed a new ultrasound, you needed a new CAT scan machine, they needed to buy new beds, right? So I'm fighting to get out of technical debt, even though I could probably stay in another year, and they need new beds for patients, right? I mean, every healthcare company has that same. It doesn't matter how much money they have; they all have the same conversations because it's all relative. When you take, it was kind of hard to then say, no, I need new PCs when you need a new CAT scan machine. So, it did make that a little more challenging. When you fast forward to COVID, not that those needs are any less for any of the hospitals, but I think the sites did see how being ready in technology, and I honestly God, I did David did not pay me to keep saying this about Microsoft and Teams and cloud. So it's but that actually put us in a good spot. So we were more prepared, and some of the other technologies we've implemented. So some of the conversations coming up that we need to do these things, and we need to be, and I like the lean in, you need to be ready for these type of things. We need to not say, well, one more year is okay. There is a good reason to move forward and to be prepared and to maybe only be 5 years behind instead of 10 years like healthcare is. Those conversations have changed, and it's a little bit easier. It doesn't mean it's really easy, and it's not always a yes, but it has changed the conversation because they saw immediately the benefit of us being a little more prepared in some areas where we wouldn't have been a couple of years ago.
Can I just build off that too?
Sure.
I think such an important point is I think the private equity firms, if they're having a stake in the decision of how money is allocated or resources are allocated in an organization, whether it's your CFO, the CIO, or others that have, it's different in every organization. But fundamentally, we've got to use this as a defining moment together to ensure that in some ways we rethink this word cost when it comes to deploying and driving and lighting up digital transformation. And the stories that Matt and Mary shared, those are specific examples of where they made their organizations more agile. They're serving their customers better. They're actually saving cost in the long run for the organization. More importantly, they're putting the organization in a strategically stronger position. And why is that any different than how a line of business leader within their same organization would do a similar sort of pitch for an allocation of funds? And then I heard there's a lot of maybe potentially CPAs on this call. I would say what we're seeing is, because we get engaged a lot on our side at Microsoft on the cost side, obviously, as you help and enable customers to move from CapEx to OpEx and managed services, it's a discussion that's at the center. And I would say we do work with partners, especially with KPMG, on ways to be extremely creative, especially during this time of a lot of financial stress for organizations. And we try to bend over backwards, especially to help state and local governments, healthcare organizations, the federal, especially in the federal space as well, to really help make it through. And again, as Matt and Mary had talked about earlier, come out stronger on the other side.
Yeah. And I think in traditional settings, right, we plan a lot and then we do a lot of boardroom meetings before we actually approve digital transformations. David, maybe I don't know if this is out of the purview question, but have you seen any clients handling unplanned IT transformations? And I am very careful when I say IT because IT is a big area. It's like an ocean, but anything that you can bring up as a customer story or a specificity that would be helpful.
Yeah, I have an interesting one. It's a real life example current. It's a big financial institution we work with. And like I think we've heard earlier with Matt and Mary, especially Mary on the Teams thing, almost overnight, you had the entire organization using Teams. So we weren't trying to talk folks into a digital way of working and leveraging teams, it was like, okay, that's the only way to survive. And within 48 hours, in many cases, companies were up and running. In this particular case, same thing happened with this big financial institution. Within a week, almost 53,000 employees on Teams. That's not what this story is about. Yes, there's a rapid adoption of Teams, but the interesting thing around IT and the operational learning was more around that earlier topic of cost management and thinking differently. Now that the organization is literally overnight digitized in a way of empowering employees to work from anywhere and any time, they have this infrastructure in place. Then what it tagged on to is like, well, how do you support these employees? How do you, look at me at home. What if I have a problem with my laptop? What if I have a problem with my ability to do two-factor authentication to get into Microsoft's network? What if I have low bandwidth? Well, this organization with 50,000 employees was getting 19,000 service tickets for support a month, extremely costly. So again, with the mindset of what can we do in 7 days, literally in 7 to 10 days, they built a bot platform to help reduce the cost in their contact center. It's kind of one of those self-service IT and operational bots. It removed many of the common service tickets. In fact, within 2 months, they dropped those service tickets from 19,000 by about 50%. And in 2 months, they did ServiceNow integration. And they really built this on the Teams platform. And again, it's one of those rapid sort of prototype and get deployed. It's a platform chatbot if you want to follow up with us or KPMG later. And it's really around touchless services and employee efficiencies. This is a big bet going forward for all of us. And it's really on that bet that the platforms can enable faster and more agile solutions, that AI is going to be at the center of many of the things that we do. And why not start leveraging those things now based on our early learnings of the forced digital transformation that has happened with all of our organizations over the past 2 or 3 months.
Thank you. And then I see a question before I go to the next question. Maybe we should give an opportunity to Dan to ask his question. Dan, you can go on mute and ask the question. And if you have that question specific to Dan or Matt or Mary, please speak it up. Dan McHugh.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can unmute him.
Hi, Dan. I think you're still muted.
Wish we had Teams, David. It would have been much easier.
I can help with that.
How about Dan? Whenever you're ready, you can speak up. Then I will stop asking questions. But in the interest of time, let's move on. So, David, you touched upon like forced digitalization and cost management, right? And maybe taking those as cues. Matt, this is for you. Getting a little more into technical, like when we talk about digital strategy and then how much energy goes into it to create one, how easy was it considering the disruption that's happening and then the reactive phase or the time we have less, but we had to help the customers or even employees much faster than anticipated. How easy was it to execute a digital strategy?
It's there are key components. One of the things that we've been spending a lot of time on internally, my team and the management team, talking about digital strategy both internally and with our customers, is what that means. Does it mean simply applying some AI to an existing business process, or some workflow automation to an existing business process, or does it mean something more substantial than that? And that's a big driver for me. I tend to think of digital transformation as being just as much about a business model change as it is about adding technology to a business process. And that makes for a much more, substantial initiative. But when you look at the, kind of historically at the trail of failed digital transformation initiatives, I always find that that's something that's called into question. Was this just a technology enhancement, or was this a true transformation? So there is something to it. I wouldn't say that it's easy, but with the right partners, and these are well-worn paths, and full-on transformation of doing business differently using digital technology, I think, is really is a key ingredient.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you talked about this business model change and having that elevated business agility, maybe David, can you think of any compromises because we want to go fast and we want a good product outcome, and we want it with less dollars, like cheap investment? So are there any compromises when we try to do these solutions faster?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we talked about it in the lead up to this. I mentioned it a couple times. I would just say security, and the importance of conditional access and zero trust. And when you do things in 7 days, when you do things in 10 days, when you do things in 3 weeks, things can fall through the cracks. And this is a dramatic potential crack when it comes to healthcare in some of the topics we're talking about earlier. And we've got to do as much as possible and have high integrity in how we keep remote workers secure and as productive as possible, when they're in the office or out of the office. And in many cases, when they're traveling, to their second home now, as many are finding second locations to live, just to make it real. And not to scare, but to make it real. In recent months, and there's posts on this, you can see Microsoft detected cyber attacks deliberately targeting healthcare organizations researching vaccines and treatments for COVID-19. It's pretty serious. And these are, from nation states. You've seen some of the press, and they're targeting these organizations in Canada, France, India, US, and others. And they use things like password spray and brute force login attempts to steal credentials. I think you all get them. I get probably 50 a day, it seems like. Thank goodness a lot goes to junk mail. And these are attacks that have a specific purpose. They're trying to break into people's accounts using thousands or millions of attempts and taking different forms of those attempts. There's plenty of examples that are variants, like spear phishing lures for credit theft. Credential theft, using fabricated job descriptions, pretending to be recruiters. We've seen it all. We've seen ones where hackers use spear phishing email lures using COVID-19 themes of your healthcare organization while masquerading as the WHO. I mean, it's pretty scary. Now, the good news is the majority of these attacks are blocked already by the security protections that are built into the Microsoft product suite. Obviously, with partners like KPMG, we work very deliberately to have that security layer at an extremely high level. And then also in April, in terms of our investment, we announced that for healthcare, we're making something called Account Guard. It's our threat notification service available to healthcare organizations. And since then, we've had about 195 of these organizations have enrolled in the service, covering about 2 million email accounts. And if you want to follow up with KPMG or Microsoft after this, any healthcare related organization that wish to enroll can do so. It's not just for healthcare. There are other scenarios when it comes to security that I would say these are the ones where you just can't let anything fall through the cracks. And it's where we spend a majority of our time on any customer engagement with KPMG especially.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for touching more about the security and security in a bigger picture, which includes the data and compliance too. And I am watching at the time too. In the interest of time, maybe I'll cut short some of the questions and go to I think for you three to ask, what is the thing that still keeps you up at night? I know you three have like great stories to share and great successes to latch onto and then encourage others who are listening today so that they can go back and discuss with their companies. So there might be something that still keeps you at night, and what will it that be? Who wants to go first? Maybe Mary, you can start first.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to say it was something other than what David just touched on, but it's security, right? So, as people moved home more, it definitely it amped everything up. I mean, between I mean, all of the attacks on hospitals, and you've seen all the ransomware, and it's been in the news like daily, and between that and all the unemployment insurance fraud, I mean, it's coming at folks from everywhere, and our CIO likes to say they only have to be right once. We have to be right millions of times. We have to stop them a million times. They only got to get in once, and that keeps me up at night. So, and I think that just as a technology, not just healthcare, I just think technology in general, that has been a major focus, and I think it's going to have to continue because it's not going to get any easier or any better, at least for a while.
Yeah. I'd say for me, really what keeps me up at night is, how do we make our cycles, our development cycles faster, and how do we get something built, tested, and measured and scaled faster and faster? There's just this constant pressure. I look at all the large tech companies like Microsoft and Google and Amazon and so forth, and they're demonstrating that it's possible every day. The amount of innovation and software that's deployed to their customers, and if we want to compete, we have to be able to do that too. So how do we compress cycles and make sure we're doing the right thing, that it's secure, it's scalable, and that we're baking customer feedback in continuously? And it's I think, like I said earlier, it's new muscle. It's a different way of thinking. We don't spend years planning and building and deploying something. We spend weeks, and then we do it again and again and again. And leadership has to understand that that's the way the investment works. You're never finished. You're continuously investing, although it's probably in smaller, more efficient increments. But it does. How do you do it faster?
Yeah. Sure. David.
Yeah, thanks for ending on this topic. Look, it's for me, what keeps me up at night is the emotional, physical, and spiritual stress that's happening on our teams. It's happening in our communities, happening in our organizations. I don't think we can hide from the fact that it's a pretty stressful time, and it's not a normal time. And I think it's taking a toll on a lot of folks. At the end of the week, I'm pretty tired. It feels like I have no time on many days to have a free thought. I can't walk between meetings. I'm not at the airport. I'm not on a plane. I'm not in a hotel room. Some of the things that I could at least separate, I'm literally waking up, having my coffee, and getting after it, and sitting down here in my downstairs. And so I think we've all got to realize this is happening to our teams and know that we're trying to work through this. But I think there's a people dimension to this that keeps me up at night, for sure.
Thank you. I think whatever the experiences and stories you have shared, I see there's an emotion and empathy coming out of it. And you don't believe we are almost at the top of the hour. So I just want to conclude reminding everyone that digital transformation is real and can be done faster with the right teams involved. No, I'm not talking about MS Teams, but yeah, internet, but yes, right teams involved. And I would like to say thank you, Mary, Matt, and David, for joining us today and sharing your valuable insights on business disruption and rapid tech transformation. And for attendees, thank you all for joining us. See you next time.